Today I'll be reviewing discussion number 7 for nonverbal communication. Most of the students in the class did a great job at providing concise yet thorough summaries while also connecting the essay to their own personal life. And particularly, I enjoyed really specific examples relating their own experiences to the text. And I also enjoyed when people would critique or question the essay and, bring up some thoughts that they had while reading it. It really shows that they were active while they read it and were making mental notes to bring up later in the discussion. To start us off, we have Rachel, who had an incredible summary, and she made sure to find the significance of the articles and pointed out that the ideas presented in the essay are demonstrated in real-life communication situations. She also found a media example that was relevant, and she had questions such as if a mother does not work on maintaining positive behaviors of her adult childhood, does this amplify the chances of issues arriving with the support of a grandchild? So she's basically wondering how far along the line does attachment issues go, which I thought was a really interesting point because often, trauma and negative attachment styles can be carried down probably for generations. And so I thought it was awesome that she brought that up and was curious about it. She was very thorough with her summary, which I loved, but she still made sure to connect it back to her own life. Others also agreed with her and also called it thorough, and they agreed with me on that. And for that, I'll give her a 10 out of 10. The next student we have, named Mia, also deserves a 10 out of 10. She expanded a lot, but I think she could have expanded a little bit more on some things. She found it interesting that 60 to 65% of social meaning is communicated non-verbally. And I wish she expanded a little bit more, as if maybe, did she think it would be less or more nonverbal communication? But she gave different aspects of significance and talked about how maternal sensitivity can be described as being tuned in. And then she gave a really interesting and relevant observation tied to her personal life, which was basically her discussing how she notices that the children she babysits, their mothers are really in tune with them. And as she gets to know them more, she becomes more in tune with them. And I thought that was a really relevant and interesting point to bring up. And it also leads into other discussions that were brought up regarding adoption and, how far along can a child be to really bond with their parents, even if they were adopted in, early or late adolescence. But yeah, Micah responded to this, and he said that he also was shocked by how much nonverbal communication plays a role in communicating messages. And they both found commonalities in their discoveries through reading, which I thought was really awesome. Micah was really thorough in his response. The next person is Shirley, and I thought she had an awesome summary and brought up the significant points of the articles, but she also brought up a good personal connection. She talked about her son and her daughter and how almost as soon as, when they were babies, she realized they had different needs and stuff. And I think that is a great example of that kind of like maternal sensitivity that the article was discussing. And you could clearly see she was understanding what they were talking about from her own experiences as a mother. Jaden responded to this post saying that they have 2 boys that are exactly 1 year apart, and each of them have different needs as well. And I thought that was really awesome that another parent in the class could relate to that. And I'm sure most parents, if they have more than one kid, could absolutely see that. I mean, I've even babysat before, and kids have completely different needs. It's not a super broad spectrum. The next person is Micah, which I also gave a 10 out of 10 for. Micah's discussion was incredible. He was pointing out they were pointing out how verbal and nonverbal communication work together to form a message. And I thought that was a really significant and valuable message to pull from the essay. He had a great summary and then reflected. He said, I don't know if it's a he or she, so I'm going to say they. They said that they believe to be more conscious now of the nonverbal and verbal cues they use within a conversation to promote supportive interaction. And by them saying that, I'm realizing that they're connecting it to real life and finding use and purpose out of this essay, which I think is the best thing that we can really do in a class like this, is connect it to real life and how we can improve as, you know, friends, family members, strangers, just how we can improve as human beings and be more aware of the kind of messages that our nonverbal cues send. So he also presented a question: what nonverbal cues do you think promote supportive interaction the most? And I think this is an awesome question and could be a discussion post in itself. People responded, they had great, thorough responses. And then, let's see, we have Kaylee, who I also gave it 10 out of 10 to. Kaylee had a great idea to ask the mothers and get the mother's point of view in the study and sort of see if that changes the dynamic and the complexity of the study at all, which I thought was really awesome. And she also wondered how supportive communication may be different if a child was adopted as a teenager. And I thought this was a really interesting and unique question. And lots of responses to her adoption question. I wish that was something that we could go more in depth in. Mia also responded and said how her foster siblings might have had to adapt to the nonverbal communication styles in her family that they already had. And I thought that was a great connection and, really showed that Mia was interacting with Kaylee's discussion post and relating it back to her own life. Alexandria, I gave a 9 out of 10 because she had great connections to her personal experiences, but she could have either critiqued the essay, came up with a question, or cited a media connection, or maybe even given a more specific example than she did, because her example was pretty general, but she did okay. I'm going a little over time here, so I'm going to start speaking quick. Andrea, I gave her an 8.5 out of 10. She had no connection really to her personal experiences, and she did put a question, but it was worded pretty strange, and I couldn't really understand what she was actually trying to ask. So I would say that she needs to just work on her wording a little bit and maybe read her post out loud and see if it makes sense. That can definitely help. Sarah, I gave a 6.5 out of 10 because she summarized, but she didn't critique, didn't really connect it or reflect on the text, and it was kind of just seemed like a summary to me. So I think there's definitely some room for improvement there. Jesse, I gave an 8.5 out of 10 because he had funny and relevant personal connections. He had a good summary, but he could have added a little bit more in the summary, or he could have added some sort of critique, and I think that would have strengthened his post. Cassandra, I gave a 6 out of 10. It was mostly a summary. There was some reflection, but not anything super interesting or in-depth. No critique, no questions about the text, no media examples. So I think Cassandra can definitely use a little more love on her discussion posts. Jaden is the next one, and she did pretty well. She had a great connection and talked about autism and special needs. She stated the significance of the article, and she even talked about self-awareness in situations where nonverbal communication is relied upon heavily, and I would give her a 10 out of 10. Next one is Zenny. I gave them a 10 out of 10. They had a great summary and a great media example. She also had a good connection after the media example to her own life. And Halia, I gave her a 10 out of 10 as well. She had a good summary. She pointed out the significance. She connected it to real life and used vocab terms from the essay, which I really liked. I think it really showed that she might have been taking notes during the essay or just really soaking in what the essay was talking about. Angelica had a good 10 out of 10 discussion post as well. She said it has made her reconsider what nonverbal communication is used for and makes her question some of her behaviors that she does unconsciously. I think that's awesome and shows some introspection, and I think that's really the best thing you can get out of this is introspection or reflection and improvement. And I think, I think she did great. And she also had a good idea that maybe it would be interesting to do this study, but with support from friends, and see how friends can lean in each other non-verbally in that sort of way. And I think that's a great idea. Shalmar, I gave a 6 out of 10. It was a pretty short discussion post and not super enriching, didn't really add anything to the conversation. I think they could have used a personal connection, a media example, or a question about the text. So yeah, I gave them a 6 out of 10. Rami, I gave a 10 out of 10 because they had a great example from the movie The Help that was relevant and fun to watch. And they also talked about their own perceptions of motherly support and what actions made them feel supported. And I think that shows that they were really reflecting on the message of the essay and tying it back to experiences they had had with their mother or parental figure. Nicole also had a great reading. I gave her an 8 out of 10 because she had a good critique, good summary, but she didn't really have a strong connection to herself or a media example. So I think she could have used a little improvement in that area. And last but not least, we have Demetria. And I think Demetria gave a great summary, good media example, and a good question. She said, if there are studies proving the connection between mother and child based on consistency and supportiveness, why are some children still okay with being around the unfamiliar? And I think that really shows she's interested in the topic and she's wondering, what happens after the study or what happens outside of it? Why? Just really creating more questions from the information she was given. But yeah, I know I'm going over time here, but all in all, mostly everyone was really great at summarizing. I'll say across the board, people had some good summaries and pointed out the significance. There was a few people who could definitely work on providing more introspection or reflection. And for those people, I would suggest taking notes while you're reading and being, critiquing the essay and just understanding that it's okay to be confused about some things. It's okay to disagree with maybe how they're wording something, and take notes of those things and use them in your discussion posts. But yeah, overall, everyone did pretty good. A lot of 10 out of 10s, and I'm proud of the students in nonverbal communication. Thanks.